Hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews, the podcast in which we take a look back at films from our youth. I used to say childhood favourites or whatever, but I think the problem we have, Chris, is if we specifically say childhood and don't include our teen years, people look at the list of films we covered and go, what the fuck? What child is watching Battle Royale and Final Destination?
Yeah.
And The Girl Next Door?
Every child should watch The Girl Next Door.
Oh, no child. No human, full stop, should watch The Girl Next Door. So yes, this week we are taking a look at a classic from my childhood, a film I have a very, very strong relationship with. If we're talking about films I loved as a child and doing like a ranking, this is honestly, in terms of like how often I watched it, how much I loved it, it's genuinely not far behind Star Wars and Back to the Future for child Dan. Now, adult Dan appreciates that's insane. But I have to tell you right now, there is no chance of this review being objective for me. And for those who are thinking, well, that's weird, Dan, because we did Short Circuit 1 and you were able to really pull that apart for its flaws. You still liked it because you do have nostalgia for it, but you understood how flawed it was. Yes, but I saw Short Circuit 1 later and a bit more old, but when I was a bit more grown up. I was given by my nana, who worked in a video store. She'd managed to get an old ex-rental copy of this that they were sort of like, in a video store like was trying to move through stock, and initially they needed 10 copies of a film, but now they only need 2 because there's no more demand for it. So they sort of sell them off, and if they can't sell them off, then they let staff get them for an even smaller amount. She had picked this one up for me, and I had no idea what it was, and I loved it dearly, and I didn't even really understand because I was so young. I think I must have been like 5 or 6 the first time I saw this film. I had no concept that this was a sequel. I told this story when we reviewed Short Circuit 1, but years later, I saw an ad on ITV for Short Circuit 1 airing on television, and it blew my fucking mind that I was like, it's Johnny Five, but he's not in the city. What's this? Like, I didn't understand at all.
Was it not called Short Circuit 2?
Yeah, it's called Short Circuit 2, Chris. I promise you. Yeah, I'm just that thick. I was just that dumb. Like, I honestly, like, I never. I didn't know and I didn't care. Admittedly, when I first saw it, I would have been, like I said, 5 or 6, so it's more understandable. But by the time I saw Short Circuit 1, it's hard to estimate a time frame for that. But I was in Ireland, so I must have been at least 8 or 9, maybe 10, like at a push. No, 8 or 9, I reckon. It was a couple of years of having Short Circuit 2 and not knowing 1 existed, for sure. But anyway, Short Circuit 2 is near and dear to my childhood heart. And I said to Chris before we started recording, there's no way I can be objective about this film as a result. So I am relying on Chris to be the voice of reason here, because I fucking love this film.
Which is annoying, because I feel like I'm a lot easier in general on, like, you were a lot more critical on Mouse Hunt, and I wish I could almost get my revenge by tearing this to shreds. But I think out of the two of us, I'm a lot more lenient on, it's a family film, does it matter?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Because I will say, and it's particularly with this film, because I suppose this leans into recommendation and then we'll do plot and stuff. So Short Circuit is unquestionably, a better movie. It is better than this. This is not a great movie.
Right.
However, it's probably not even objectively a good movie. However, I enjoyed it a lot more than the first one.
Right.
And I personally also prefer this, because for me, it is closer to what it's aiming for than the first one. Now, the reason for that is it's aiming a lot lower. My memory of the first one is that it was kind of aiming to be E.T. This isn't aiming to be E.T.
Right.
It's aiming to be, I don't know, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, getting even with Dad. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
that sort of film. And it's much closer to that than the first one is to E.T. I also genuinely do think it's funnier. It's bizarre, it's nuts, but the actual jokes, I think, are stronger.
Yes.
And there's less, like, obviously, there's still the problem
Fisher Stevens,
one of the lead characters. yeah. Which there kind of unfortunately isn't any more to say other than you know, in addition to what we said the first time.
Yeah,
everything still applies. It's still wrong, still awful. He's doing the best he can. He probably regrets it. Yeah, all of that stuff still applies. But I also had a lot of problems in the first one with like the love story.
Yep.
And don't get me wrong, this has a weak love story too. And I seem to remember there was some scene where they implied there was almost like sexual tension or like a romantic thing between the robot and her or something. I can't really remember.
So there's a scene where they dance. They do the dance from Saturday Night Fever. Because it's what he's watching, and like it's a romantic dance in that movie, so it comes off a bit weird when she does the romantic dance with Johnny Five in the first movie. Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, there's I mean, we'll get to it. Like there's stuff in this that is just really bizarre and weird, but it felt like I was watching a film that if I'd have seen it as a kid, I'd have probably reacted a similar way to you. And I think that's another thing. I don't think I'd have reacted that way to the first Short Circuit, because again, it felt like it was trying to be this artsy thing, but missing slightly.
Yeah, it was kind of. It was darker in tone as well, like in general, and a little bit more. Like I think the first one tried to be a mix of like an adult film and a family film. We talked a lot about how the movie has like themes of militarization, because the whole point is these robots were made just to be robots, and then that, you know, Schroeder and Nova were trying to turn them into death machines, and that's quite an adult concept. You know, I think like it's not even really the subtext to that movie. A lot of that movie is about the fact that these robots have weapons and that the creators didn't want that. And that you know, Schroeder, the villain of the first movie, spends a lot of that movie using his military power to try and destroy Johnny Five, because he thinks he's a threat. He thinks he might blow up a bus full of nuns, as the joke goes, because that's that amazing thing. Is that, you know, what headline would you write if number 5 blows up a bus full of nuns and Ben just goes, nun soup? Which is still an amazing joke from the first one. But you're right, like those themes are so much more off base for the target audience, whereas the simple theme of he's not being accepted because he's a robot, and comparing that to Ben as an immigrant, not an immigrant, obviously played by a white dude, big problem, but like taking that out of the equation for just a second, from a script perspective, like that's a much more relatable theme for a child, I think, than concerns over the militarization of machines.
It's trying, and don't get me wrong, like honestly, there, like I said, I still think objectively the first one is better, but I just had more fun with this one because I think this one is trying to be a family-friendly children's film that's a bit of a romp, and it is like it is that, and I like I say, I do think it's funnier, and it's, you know, there's, trust me, and again, we're gonna get there, but there's stuff that makes no sense in Home Alone 2: Lost in New York. Do you know what I mean? And obviously that is a much better film than either of these films.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, I feel like they, whether deliberate or not, they had a better idea, or indeed, you know, you could view it two ways. You could view it that they had a better idea in this of what they were aiming for and went for it and got closer to it, or you can view it as they were actually aiming for something such a lot higher, like the immigrant stuff, which again, I agree with you, is more obvious in this. They were aiming a lot higher, but they missed so spectacularly that you don't even really notice they were aiming for it as much as the first one. Could be either option. One is a massive compliment, one is not deliberate. Either way, personally, doesn't matter. I still had quite a good time watching it.
It's a lot of fun, isn't it? I noticed yesterday I was watching it and Nadia came through the room to, like, she was getting a cup of tea or something. She was working in the room. It's the weirdest thing about furlough, by the way, is like that sometimes, like, I'm writing most days, so it feels like we're both working but in separate rooms. But then there are days when I have to watch stuff to prep for podcasts. So Nadia's in there dealing with like spreadsheets and all sorts of nonsense, you know, from work, like stress. She comes out and I'm just watching Short Circuit. But with that aside, she came through and like with it, like the scene that was on was the boosting car stereo scene where they were tricking him into boosting, and she got kind of drawn in. So she was waiting for the kettle to boil initially, so she was looking at it, but then she was definitely in the room for longer than she would have been had that film not been on, because she did get pulled in. You know, there is a charm to this film, and I do think I genuinely feel like they did care. They really this movie could have been the easiest, cheapest, shittest cash in ever. They didn't need to bother with the you know, the expensive sort of like stunt work that they do in this movie. They, you know, especially towards the end, they didn't need to go for the emotional heartstrings they go for with the attack towards the end, which is one of the most upsetting things I've ever seen on film to this day. My child Dan's, I cannot express to you how it felt as a child watching Short Circuit 2 and seeing that sequence at the end, towards the end, where
mate, there's so many. Like, I mean, how many times and how many ways can you kill off a robot? Is what this film should be called. Like, how many? Like, when he was like, bearing in mind we'd already had a dramatic death scene. When Ben's like, he's leaking fluid, I was like, oh fucking hell, are we going to watch this robot die again? And in my head, I was like, children watch this.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's crazy about it.
It's genuinely distressing.
Yeah, it was, and I remember thinking as a child, like I don't remember thinking this exactly, but I think one of the things that kept Child Dan like engrossed in this movie and loving this movie was very few kids films will make you feel like that does. Do you know what I mean? Kids films don't go for sad emotions like that. They didn't, I should say. You know, children these days have got a much larger spectrum of feelings that come from the content they watch. You know, whether it be the opening of Up, you know, or Bing Bong in Inside Out. You know, there are plenty of very heightened emotional things in kids' films now, but they didn't do that sort of stuff back in the day. They were like, children must have happy things. So this movie, like, again, I think one of the reasons young Dan attached to this film is that it's so different to anything else I would have been ingesting media diet wise at the time. And it created such a strong emotion, and it is again, it could have been such a lazily done thing. This whole movie could have been so lazily done, top to bottom, and it feels like they really did design it to make you feel like sad in that moment, like absolutely. I mean, I remember feeling distraught as a child. You know, it's a very particular feeling it elicits, and I can't even imagine how it must come across for an adult who's never seen it. Like, were you, when that scene was sort of cropping up, were you just like, because I wondered, like, does that work for an adult? You're just like, oh, it's just a kid's movie, he's a robot, he's probably going to be fine. Or is it violent enough? Because especially that shot where they hit him and the battery fluid goes up the other guy's shirt. That shot always upsets me the most because they make it look like blood. Because the battery fluid
it look like blood
is red. How did it play for you as an adult, like watching it for the first time?
I'll be honest. I was slightly distracted that a robot that's just spent half an hour literally forcing his way and digging through concrete could then take a couple of hits and be taken down. It's
right.
a little bit like it feels like there's slight inconsistencies here as to the amount of stuff we've seen this robot do this movie. And he's just he's taking a battering and it works. I
guess the explanation is that they trick him, they get behind him, he's not expecting it, but
yeah, you can explain it.
Yeah.
No, it does land. Before we just, because I'm conscious of we haven't done a plot summary and a recommendation. So
sure.
No, that's fine. I would begrudgingly. I think it's just annoying. Yeah, because I'm just not as harsh as you, I think, on these sort of films, and it disappoints me because when it's a film of my childhood, like if we watch Good Burger and you're like, right, I can see why you like it, but here are the reasons.
Oh no, I love Good Burger. Trust me, that's not going to happen with Good Burger. I maintain Good Burger's quality to this day. So when we get to Good Burger, don't worry.
But I do think if you like I say, we need to watch for this at some point, Getting Even with Dad and Three Men and a Baby and those sorts of films.
Yes,
but my memory, at least, of those films You know, if that appeals, you're after like a nostalgic family romp. I do think there's merit in here to checking it out and recommending it. I think there is enough. There is a good combination of legitimately entertaining things. Again, some of the jokes are genuinely very funny, and this is madness. You know, watch for how bizarre and bad it can be. Entertainment in there, you know, because I don't think just that alone is enough. Personally, like I've never watched a bad movie, especially if you're watching it on your own, to just be like, oh, isn't this a bad, and poke fun at it. But there is a little element of that here, and balanced with enough actually good content. You know, the themes, you know, it's got flaws. We'll talk about them, but yeah, I honestly, I cannot deny that I had a really good time watching it, and I have no choice but to recommend it.
I like the annoyance of this for you. This is like clearly annoyed you a little bit because it sounds like you really wanted to be able to pull my childhood to pieces, which is interesting.
No. I wish I had it in me too, but not because of anything this movie did. I'm being completely honest, because I could, if I wanted to, I could easily. You would not question it if I was here going,
"Oh no,
it's shit," and these are the reasons.
No.
But I have to be honest with the review. No, my only disheartening comes because if I know that if you didn't have a childhood connection, you'd perhaps not be. Although to be fair, we were very complimentary of Dr. Dolittle, and I didn't expect that. So you know,
no, and I would say if you look back through the list, like 10 Things I Hate About You was a pleasant surprise for both of us. I think that held up. I'm looking back now. Bill and Ted obviously was that's a gimme, isn't it? I remember being pleasantly surprised with Lady and the Tramp. We talked very positively about that. I was surprised at how well that held up. Sorry.
Yeah, I suppose it was only really Mouse Hunt. Really, is the only example of, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we've not been on like the same page necessarily. Yeah, I think that's it. Because I think
because Mouse Hunt is the most equivalent to this, because I, like you, was very open in the fact that I was blinded by nostalgia.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Whereas a lot of the other movies we've managed to, I think, to be reasonably, reasonably objective, or we've tried to be. I mean, one of the other struggles for me was Little Shop of Horrors, because that's another one that I was very, very fond of as a kid. But yeah, so I think we've either been on legitimately. Go on, sorry.
Little Shop is a better movie than either Mouse Hunt or this.
Yeah, Little Shop. Yeah, Little Shop is objectively a better movie. It's tricky, isn't it? Because that is the problem. Is I know this movie doesn't hold up. Like, I even had a pang of like, oh, but it is. When you said it, when you compared it to Home Alone 2, you're absolutely right. Of course, objectively, Home Alone 2 is clearly a better movie than Short Circuit 2. But my childhood brain refutes that so strongly. It's like even that made me go like, so I have to be very careful with this one, because I don't want to come across like I'm not giving it a fair review. And there are problems with this movie. There are definitely things that don't work. I definitely reckon you could maybe snip about 10 minutes out of this movie. It's a little bit.
Oh, without a doubt.
It's a little too long. I think a lot of what makes the ending work, though, is the work they put in the earlier parts of the movie. But some of it is retreading the same ideas over and over again. So, like, there are duplicates of scenes, aren't there? Where they're both different scenes, but they give us the same message. And you just go, well, you just keep one of them then, right? Like, you could take at least 10. I think if you were being really tight, 20, but once you take out 20, you might actually lose something from the film. But it definitely could be shorter. An hour and 50 minutes is quite long, really, especially for a kids' film from that era.
It's the Snyder Cut of Johnny Five movies, isn't it? You know, because I got some specific things that will go. So quick, did you want to? Because I want to give you the joy of doing it. Do you want to recap the plot for those that don't remember?
Yes. So if you don't remember, or you're not bothering watching it, although I obviously recommend this film, I think it's still actually a super fun film. And I think I think they put a surprising amount of effort into it and making it work when they really didn't need to. This movie would have made the amount of money it was going to make regardless, it's and especially back then there was very much a general vibe especially with family movies and sequels and stuff, of just like pump it out, take the cash, get the fuck out. Like, there was that, that was a very common occurrence. You look at sequels from this era, very few of them have any money or effort put into them, and many of them even just went straight to video. They were Return of Jafar, sort of just like crack it out, stick it on TV. don't worry about it. We'll make the money. So the fact that this movie actually is a functional movie at all is a kind of a miracle. But for those who don't remember or aren't rewatching, the plot is Ben Javeri, one of the sort of a supporting character from the previous movie, has moved to the city being a question mark, never specified which city it is. I mean, it looks like Canada because it is Canada.
I was going to say, the most Toronto-looking version of America, because it is... it is America because they talk about becoming American citizens enough. It's definitely not Toronto, but it absolutely is Toronto.
Yeah, Toronto. Yeah, it is the most Toronto I've ever seen. Even as a kid, I knew it didn't quite look like New York, and I couldn't work out why. So Ben is now there. He's selling little toys to make a living of Johnny Five. And he's also learning to be, or studying to be an American citizen, to become an American citizen officially. And he meets this lady, Sandy, who works for Sampson's Toy Department, which is kind of like a play on like those, those big American department stores. And she wants to buy the toys, but he can't manufacture anymore. Enter Fred, my favorite character from this movie. Fred's amazing, played by Michael McKean, who you'd know from a number of things, but I think most recently people know him from his work on Better Call Saul.
Although at the time, for the time, because I assume, from just how he looks, that this is just after Spinal Tap, which is such great casting to kind of put something in there for the parents that are going to get dragged along to make them go, it's got the Spinal Tap guy in though. Like, genius casting. Yeah,
it is. And he's, like, again, the amount of effort people are putting into this project is surprising. Like, he is acting his ass off in this film to bring this character to life. So he meets, Ben meets Fred, who basically gets money from a loan shark in order to help Ben get a production line going of these toys. But the building they've chosen, it's so complicated, this movie sometimes. The building they've chosen to build the toys in is sort of above a tunnel these criminals are trying to dig to get into a vault that's at the bank across the street to steal a bunch of diamonds. So they have to get Ben and Fred out of this warehouse.
Because the diamonds are only there for a certain amount of time.
The diamonds are only there for a certain amount of time, and they've only got so many days to get through and like get them. And they have to stop. If they have to stop digging for more than an X number of days, I don't remember the exact number, but they have to stop digging for more than a certain amount of days. They're in trouble. So they go in and smash the place up, which sort of leaves them in a pretty low place. But lo and behold, help is sent in the form of Johnny Five, who can build the robots really quickly and at a better standard of quality than what they were previously being built at. And he can do it all on his own. They've just got to leave him in that warehouse doing it. But of course, Johnny Five, excited by input, out in the city, finds out where he is, gets into all sorts of scrapes out in the city in his attempt to fit in. He doesn't fit in very well at all because he's a robot and people don't really seem to understand that he's alive, because why would they? At one point he even gets himself arrested, which is just ridiculous. Meanwhile, Ben is trying to crack on to the lady from Sampson's, Sandy. It's in a very... I have mixed feelings about that relationship, because I know objectively it's handled terribly, but there's parts of me that really buy it, and I don't know why that is, because I know on paper it doesn't work at all. They don't do hardly anything with it, so we'll come back to it, I guess. In the end, basically, the criminals trick Johnny Five into helping them steal the diamonds and then destroy him. Beat him to near death. At which point, Fred, who has a mixed relationship with Johnny Five, has to be the hero and save him and bring him back to life, restore him. And then Johnny Five goes to catch the criminals, even though he's dying. He's still leaking battery fluid. He's not as repaired as he's pretending he is. I think hinted by the KO Durf line. And then Johnny Five goes and saves the day and gets American citizenship for stopping the bank robbers, which is really weird but fun. I guess that's the crux of it.
And I think for me the most obvious. Because as it's a kids' movie, an obvious complaint is Johnny Five doesn't appear for like 20 minutes. I actually think that's fine. I think Ben's enough of a carry through from the sequel. We got some cute stuff with the toys roaming around. I think that's fine. for me, the obvious things are there's a period of this movie where it's just a series of bits involving a robot in the city. You could cut down on some of them.
Yeah.
As you said, a lot of them say the same thing, do the same thing.
Yeah.
Some of them are entertaining, admittedly. Him getting tricked into stealing radios from cars is entertaining.
I don't think I would cut that one, because I think that one is probably makes the same point, but also is really funny.
And the trouble is, there's probably some good in each bit. Like in the library sequence, I think that's where he reads Hound of Baskerville, isn't it? It was that another point of the movie.
He reads Hound of Baskerville in the opening. It's Pinocchio and Frankenstein he picks up from the
so maybe you cut that. I don't know, but the most obvious one for me is just do something else to make Fred the bad guy, because it's weird. Is someone going to buy or steal for their own gain Johnny Five? It felt like they went, we should probably acknowledge this. So you have a scene where Fred goes to sell Johnny Five, finds out what he's worth, and then Johnny Five escapes through the window. Mm-hmm. And it's never returned to. And you could have easily made the people that wanted him the same people as the bad guys. Or you could have made, if we can't have him, no one can, and they beat him up. I don't know what, but I just think that's a weird... Surely they could have made him and Fred fall out some other way, if you're not going to circle back to these people that want to buy Johnny Five.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there, because I do like the sort of antagonistic almost relationship between Fred and Johnny, where Fred simply doesn't understand
you need it.
that he's alive, and it makes that ending work when Fred's the one who repairs him. When Fred's the one who tears the shirt he's been talking about all movie, he loves his damn silk shirt. When he just tears it off without a second thought to put it over essentially the wound on where the battery's leaking. That's actually a surprisingly good character moment. Like, that works, I think, quite well, because they build it into the whole movie, right? So they need that antagonistic relationship, because I think one of the things this movie surprisingly does is almost every character has a reasonably good arc. Like, fuck knows how or why, because again, these movies generally don't have any effort put into them, but this does. Like, all the characters get some sort of arc, except a little bit, except for they don't pay off Sandy's work situation in the end, which
no. So again, maybe less of a focus on that, but you could have had Fred. Because because they want to make Fred the good guy at the end. They don't make him... They're a bit afraid to make him worse at the beginning.
Yes.
So, I think the simplest solution is don't have him try and sell Johnny Five. Have him screw over Ben. And so, maybe he gets the toy company to sign a contract that says, actually, Ben's only going to get... 5% of what he should be getting, and Fred's taking the rest.
Stop stealing plot lines from Good Burger.
Yes, it is the same plot as Good Burger. But do you see what I mean? I
agree. It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's such a fine balance, because it makes perfect sense that when he finds out how much that robot is worth, because it also leans into this idea of Johnny Five being an object, not a person. I think that's why they went that route. I agree with you. There might have been an easier way to do it, but it does also reinforce one of the main themes of the movie, which is this idea that he's alive and everyone else basically considers him property, machinery. When the police get him, they don't put him in a cell. They put him in stolen goods. They chain him up there. So it both has the effect of making Fred the villain, for a little bit, giving him that antagonistic relationship, but then it has the other benefit of also leaning into the existing theme of Johnny being sort of treated like an object. Although I agree with you, it's weird they don't circle back to it. It's do these people not what they do? They do a lot with that scene where those guys are all referencing Nova, and they don't believe he's real, and it's quite a long sequence when they're trying to sell him, and you do sort of wonder are they going to come back to these guys? What's the point of them? Although I do also like that it does put a rift between Ben and Fred too. It doesn't just upset Johnny. Ben also, is very angry at Fred.
Yeah, and it leads to some nice moments with them, like in the freezer and stuff. When Sandy is magically able to understand the phone message, be so convinced that he's in trouble. Like, let's speaking of relationships, let's talk about Sandy and Ben, because one night, right, I loved Johnny Five writing notes on the traffic warning sign for Ben to repeat is genius. It's a great idea, and it shows that there are a number of points in this film. Another big one is the Home Alone style burglary alarm, where you're like, fucking hell, this film has a lot of imagination. Like, that's a clever, fun idea. Really liked that.
Yeah, and they set that up as well. They show him building it, and you don't know what it is he's building, and then they show it paying off, like, you know, I don't know, 20 minutes later or whatever in the movie. And when you see that cinder block being used, because they show Fred giving him the cinder block, and then they show the cinder block used in this security system, that feels very cohesive. Like, it just sort of flows through. Sorry,
I made some notes because I was watching it last night, whereas I watch them the same day.
Right.
So I was like, I'll just make the occasional note just to jog my mind if I forget stuff. And I've literally written about Ben and Sandy. If these two end up together, they haven't done nearly enough to justify it. For example, the "we're already in business together" scene. There is no sign of romantic affection from her at all.
No.
And it is like, you could have show her thinking he's sweet then. Show her being amused by him. They literally, until the scene where she magically falls in love with him, they do nothing to indicate that she may have feelings for him. And it's such a simple fix. Like, you don't even need to change that much. You could probably even do it, and I'm not criticising the actor. I'm sure that's what's on the page and that's what the direction was.
Yeah, of course.
But even in just the performance, you can do stuff in earlier scenes when they're together to make it seem more believable that they then fall in love.
Yeah, they're sort of struggling, aren't they, with their own idea? Because I think the concept, I think the notion and the reason they told her to play it that way, because you're absolutely right, I think it's important to remember choices like that, while an actor can, in a look, sell a relationship, they can't if they're told not to, if they're told that's not the purpose of the scene. And I suspect the thinking was, the way that nobody sees Johnny Five as a person, she doesn't see Ben as a romantic interest. He's a business partner and nothing more. She's very busy. She's, focused on her work. And it's only when the insane thing happens that she starts to, which is when they force her bus to break down, sort of force her into this weird date where Johnny Five, like, gives Ben the truth, from the sign. And there's that moment when that goes horribly wrong and he admits to her that he's been trying to get her attention that way. And she says, that's why you've been weird this whole time. Their idea is she didn't see Ben for what he is, the way that the rest of society doesn't see John. They were trying to create that idea and that parallel. The problem is, you're right, it means that when she does finally see him, you buy the relationship less. And that parallel they were trying to draw isn't drawn strongly enough in the text of the film for it to work. So you don't get the thing they were going for, and you harm the other thing. Do you know what I mean? So I understand how they got to where they got in the final edit. I see what happened, but the thing they were trying to do didn't work, which is draw that parallel between Johnny Five and Ben's situation. And they harmed their romantic relationship in the process.
Because they literally have a scene where she says, she gets the phone call and it's got like the music kind of Morse code.
Right, yes.
And she says to, I think, the taxi driver, I know something's wrong. I just know it. And you're like, do you? Because in the last scene you were in, you thought he'd stood you up and you looked pissed off and annoyed about that. You didn't look like there must be a problem, something must be wrong, and worried. And you just struggle to, like exactly what you said, just buy the whole thing.
Yeah.
There's
definitely some odd decisions made regarding the Sandy character.
Yeah, and it's a shame because, like, there's actually a lot of good ideas there. and it does lead to some good things. And I do sort of think you need it. You need the love story in a way. You need the brevity. I think you could have, if you're looking for things to cut to make it shorter, you probably, could have cut it. But I did, I like a love story, but it just needed a bit more work to make it believable.
Yeah, I think what you would potentially do if you're doing some second unit, like some reshoots or whatever, to try and sort of complete the movie, you'd be looking to maybe snip out some of the New York Johnny Five getting into scrape stuff, because again, as we've said, some of that repeats ideas we've already had. And instead you'd replace it with some more scenes to build up their relationship. If you were, assuming you weren't looking to shorten the movie, you were just looking to improve it. I definitely
Which, as you say, they hope ideally there'd be a way to do both, because it should be shorter.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Johnny Five's first death, where he gets beaten up, and it really does effectively build. And they've managed to escape, and they're rushing out, and he's getting beaten up, and the burglars are getting away, and I was like, fucking hell, this is some intense shit for a children's film. And then I happened to pause it, and I was like, there's fucking half an hour left.
Right.
What?
Yeah, because they've moved it all along. So whereas that would feel like the climax of a normal movie, that's actually by script writing structure, it's later in the movie than it should be, but that is the second act, end of second act downbeat. That is,
exactly.
Johnny Five sadly rolling through the streets, all beaten up. Fred looking for him. When he finds him, and he's like, Johnny Five, and then he realizes how damaged he is, and he turns around and he looks just so sad, like his eye is hanging out. It's awful. It's really upsetting. But that moment is the end of the second act, which is insane, because there's 25 minutes of the movie left at that point.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be an hour and 50 minutes. It's quite take out what it needs to be just for a kids' film alone. It's quite lengthy.
Yeah, agreed. And I will say as well, like it's a shame, but there are scenes that just. I get, we've said this already, but like I'll give an example this time. Like of scenes where just don't do anything new that we haven't already seen, and it's a good scene, but it just doesn't tell us anything new. The scene where Johnny goes into the church and talks to the priest does amuse me. It is funny, but it's not as funny as the scenes that go before it. And again, it repeats the same point. That could go easily.
Yeah, it's a great example.
Yeah, it's like 4 minutes, 5 minutes of the movie, and he goes into this church, starts confessing, talking about how people don't see him as a person, they see him as a machine, which is again an idea we're constantly going back to in this script. And then the priest is like, well, blah blah, the soul. He's like, soul? I have a soul? He's like, of course you do. You're human, aren't you? And you right?
Oh, fuck.
Chris is dying, everyone.
Oh.
I need the sad Johnny Five music to go under Chris basically dying on mic.
Oh no, I'd rather you cut that out, because I had to spit my water back out. So I imagine that sounds quite grim.
Well, I'll cut your side of the vocal out. I'll keep me on the.
Oh, sorry, I swallowed some water down the wrong way. Yeah, apologies.
At first I was like, he's just having a little cough, I'll power through. And then I was like, I can't, he's dying. I've got to address this.
Yeah, sorry, I swallowed some water down the wrong way, which caused me to choke, and I had to spit my water back out. So hopefully Dan's muted my side of that, because it probably didn't sound very pleasant. Apologies, Dan. Carry on.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so he basically just says to the priest, like, I have a soul. So, of course you do. You're human, aren't you? He's like, no, I'm a machine. And the priest, like, yells at him and kicks him out. And the priest is really angry. But again, it's funny, but it doesn't do anything any other previous scene has. So that is a perfect example of, like, a 4 or 5 minute scene that could just absolutely be cut. There's really no reason to keep that. I do love the sequence where he gets clothes, though, and tries to blend in. That I wouldn't want to lose that. That's a really sort of... It's almost sad.
No, and like I said earlier, the stuff with the robbery is good and stuff. And even, like, the library sets up that he can, like, this whole input idea.
Yeah, and also it's got one of my favourite jokes when he tells him that craphead is a compliment. Fred tells Johnny Five craphead is a compliment, yes. So he goes up to the clerk with the 2 books. I'll take these, craphead. It's just perfect.
It's very good.
And that actress, an extra or whatever. I'm not sure what level, what when she was cast as an actress, or she was just an extra they got. But her reaction, I hope they paid her more money when they got the take, because her reaction to that is amazing.
Yeah,
do you want to stop for a minute and take some water and
No, Jess has just come in and said, "Did I want some water?" And she's going to get me some.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So I
what you should do is just cut any cough from my end, and listeners will be like, "What the hell?" Let me tell you, it sounded pretty bad.
Yeah, I think I'll probably leave in some of the sort of normal coughs just so people know we're not making it up. But I will definitely cut out the moment you nearly choked and spat your water. So that I will mute. But I'll leave in some of the coughs on a low level, just so people know we're not making it up.
Let's delve into Fred, because
yes,
unfortunately, they wanted to do so much with Fred
that
he's a massive contradictions. Like, even just the fact that you set up this guy who's all about the money. It's weird that he doesn't once go. For someone that's been shown to be quite shrewd with identifying ways to make money, it shouldn't need to be pointed out to him by someone else that Johnny Five is clearly worth a lot of money. But okay, fine.
Yeah, that might be more a thing of the time, because I was thinking about this, and a lot of people just when he finds out how much he's worth, he finds out from Oscar, who says, "I know a little something about computers." This is 88. I just think this is lack of understanding of technology and what technology would be worth, and the idea that a machine that could operate automatically like that was not unsupervised like that. They repeatedly make points where several of the characters just do not get what Johnny Five is and why he's impressive. So I think that might just be, back in the day, people had no understanding of technology and its value. So I think they kind of cover that. And certainly if you'd have seen it in the era it was out, you'd have probably bought that a bit better as well.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's fair. I'll give you that. But do you think in general, because if you were those bad guys, the people committing the robbery, and there's a great twist, the twist that Oscar's actually involved in that is done very well.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I really want to talk about the way they set up Oscar. It's very good.
Yeah, that's very good. But there's an element of, part of me's thinking, I mean, it's clear that Fred's a bit of a wrong-un. Why didn't they just go to him and tell him, do you know what I mean, and cut him in?
But I suppose you got to be careful that sort of thing. That you cut someone in and you actually, it turns out you can't trust them. They could dub you in it.
Yeah, and whilst Fred seems like a bit of a Del Boy, he never comes across as too much. He never comes across as a criminal.
No.
And that element they do well. But yeah, I just think maybe a little bit of tweaking is needed here and there on who Fred is for consistency.
Yeah.
So that's fair.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's. I think when you've seen the movie as many times as I have, there's lots of. I think there are very, very subtle hinted at explanations for Fred that sort of make it work better when you basically know the movie line for line, as we found out I do last night. But
you shouldn't need to. For that, it should work without.
Yeah, of course. No. This is why I'm agreeing with you. It is there, but it's thin. It definitely could use a little bit of bolstering somehow, just a bit of consistency, a little bit of rewriting, maybe just to smooth out some of the edges. Because the character is very well defined when it comes to the broad strokes of the movie. The Del Boy character that's got a heart of gold, essentially deep down. Who earlier in the movie, before he really understands Johnny Five's existence, tries to sell him, because of course he does, because he's a bit of a Del Boy, and it's, as far as he's concerned, it's a machine, learning the lesson that Johnny Five's alive. Although, worth noting, it's a little bit on Ben for not telling him the truth about Johnny Five earlier, but we'll put that aside for a second. So the broad strokes of his journey, I think, are actually really clear. It's the little nuances that become a bit messy and jagged, and you sort of go, why did he say that? Why did he do that? It's just odd little behaviors, here and there that don't quite fit with what they're setting up. But again, the broad stroke of the guy that, the bit of a Del Boy that tries to sell him and then realizes he's alive and then ends up, caring for him almost as much as Ben, that sequence in the Radio Shack where he's repairing him is I think really good. He shows genuine concern through that sequence. And I think it's...
But why is that Radio Shack not open? Like, it's not enough to have the dude appear at the end and be like, I was just coming. It's like, no, middle of the day, people are milling about why is this Radio Shack randomly closed. And also, the Radio Shack
it was a Sunday, Chris. It was the Lord's Day. I don't know.
It's not enough to justify, like, oh, we got this old radio and now he's a military-grade weapon. Like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, what I do like about that, though, is I will say one thing I like about that scene is they don't try to make it seem as though Fred did everything. What they make it seem like is Fred got Johnny repaired enough to then finish repairing himself, which is actually a really smart way around the problem you're writing yourself into, because when you've got... Go on.
Yeah, but the problem is not that anyone has the technical ability. The problem is the believability that there would be enough equipment and the standard of equipment required hanging around that Radio Shack.
Yeah, well, I guess this is fansplaining. They never say this in the movie, so this isn't really a fair. This isn't a counterpoint to your criticism. That your criticism there is valid, but I would say as well, they don't really make it seem like that was enough. I mean, it's clear that he's patched up the best he could be with the kit they have available to them in the Radio Shack. Not...
In terms of, yeah, but I'm talking specifically about the weapon he becomes. I mean, he becomes Rambo, dude. Like,
yeah, but what does he do that they've added? Like, he doesn't have any new items on him. He doesn't have a gun strapped to him. He's just what he was earlier in the movie when he beat up the things, but just patched up. Like, what does he do that's new other than have a mohawk?
Doesn't he put like a string of bullets or something around him?
No, I think it's battery packs. I think it's small battery packs.
Is it battery packs? Right.
I think it's like a bandolier of battery packs. I think. Even if he did, at no point does he fire anything. He basically chases them down on the treads he already has. He from underneath lifts up the car, then uses the radio, which they've already set up he has, to make the car go haywire inside. Then he fights them in a way he's fought them already in the movie earlier, where they try to hit him with crowbars and he grabs them and throws them around. And then when he goes after Oscar, he uses the plunger on a string that he can fire out of his backpack thing, which we already saw in the movie when he stops the taxi. Which, by the way, another great moment in this movie when the taxi goes past and he shoots it with the plunger thing, pulls it back, and then just goes, "Thank you for stopping." Which is just such a lovely moment. I think that's what makes me laugh. But yeah, he doesn't do anything. You're right. He's a man on a mission in those last 10 minutes of the movie for sure. He's like, yeah, he's like angry and he's got the red eye. He's like, and I love how they set that up as well. The moment he's talking to excuse me, I caught your cough. When he's talking to Fred and he goes, "What did they do with you?" He's like, "Oh, they threw me in bed in a freezer. They just wanted us out of the way." And he's like, "Oh, throw the humans in the freezer, destroy the machine." And then he gets pissed. And I was like, yes. Like, he's angry. So yeah, he doesn't, I don't think he attaches anything to himself at any point in that he did. There's nothing on him that he couldn't have gotten out of a Radio Shack. And he doesn't have any new abilities having come out of the Radio Shack. He's just pissed off and patched up.
Fair enough.
Yeah. The mohawk is the most unnecessary thing ever, though. It's worth noting. For those who don't remember, when he repairs himself, he adds a mohawk for no reason whatsoever, other than, I guess, to be a reference to Taxi Driver.
I assume so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you, going back to Fred? Did I miss the point where this is one of my notes? I'll read you it as it's written. Yeah. In fact, this is the first note I made. Mm-hmm. Did I miss the part where they stated that Fred and Ben were going to live on site? Because they're in their pajamas when the guys in masks show up again.
Yeah.
Line by line. Is that stated?
I think he does. I think maybe at some point someone says that we'll stay here, but it's a bit unclear what they mean by that. And I guess you do already know Ben lives out of his van at present. so it makes sense that they'd have to live there. But yeah, I don't think the movie makes it explicitly clear they're going to be working and living out of that fucking building. So it is funny when you see them like sleeping and in their pajamas, and like it's the moment when Johnny Five like wakes Fred up the next morning by making all the robots do the dance to, I think, is it James Brown or something? I can't remember what it is. He plays a song and Fred's like, I'm trying to sleep over here. You're like, oh shit, they live there.
Yeah.
I don't think it's at any point established prior to that, so it is quite surprising.
It's very bizarre. What's one of your notes then?
So I mean, let's talk about Oscar. Oscar's just genius. So for those who don't remember, Johnny Five goes out, and in one of my favorite sequences of the movie, he meets Los Locos, which are a street gang that steal car stereos, and they have a little slogan: "Los Locos kick your ass, Los Locos kick your face, Los Locos kick your balls into outer space." And they're just running around. I love this. By the way, I love this movie's version of what gangs are: little catchphrases and colourful outfits. Like it's quite adorable. It's like they fell out of West Side Story.
It's very West Side Story.
And they're running around with a little slogan and whatever, and they're trying to steal these car stereos, and they are unfortunately a bit of an ethnic stereotype, which is another little slight icky part of the movie, But they're trying to steal car stereos, and Johnny Five sees them trying to break into this car, and is like, I can help and unlock it, and he unlocks it because he's naive and childlike and doesn't understand that they're doing something bad. And they're like, oh, they tell him something like, we're from the car stereo repair company, and we got to repair all these stereos, but look how many cars they made us do today. We just want to get home and see our families and stuff. I know he said our families and little babies and stuff. And Johnny Five was like, oh, so he steals the radios for them, gets inducted into the gang. And he's on his way back to the thing, completely covered in graffiti, when he bumps into Oscar. And when he first meets Oscar, we've only seen Oscar once earlier in the movie, which is this kind of downtrodden banker guy. He works at the bank where the diamonds are being stored, and which is what I think is so clever, by the way, because when you find out he's on the team with the bad guys, it makes perfect sense, because his boss is like a dick to him. And he just seems like a really nice guy. And when he meets Johnny, he's like, oh, no, it's over there. I can take you. And he takes him home. And the way they set it up, he seems like such a nice guy. It's so well done how sweet Oscar is in the opening of the movie that you believe it too. And as I said to you, Nadia came in during the Los Locos scene. And so she was still in the room watching when Oscar returns the second time. And he's brought Johnny the input, the little tourism guide, which is such a small thing, but it literally made Nadia go, oh, that's nice. I like Oscar. And I was like, they've got you. They've won.
That's what they want you to think.
That's what they want you to think. And then they have, they have the scene with him there. And again, it has this very, very pleasant interaction with both Fred and Johnny, and he does seem like a really positive character, a really nice character. And I absolutely buy anyone being genuinely shocked when they later in the movie reveal that Oscar, as the downtrodden, mistreated, person who works at the bank next door, of course would have the information and the know-how to be helping those two thugs break in and steal those diamonds. It's a three-man job, and he's their inside man with the info, basically. And it makes so much sense. It's super clever. It's a really well disguised twist, because I do think they genuinely convince you Oscar's like a really nice guy. And then when they shoot the scene where they reveal it, it's done brilliantly. It's the two guys talking, and then the camera literally sort of pulls and pans a little to bring Oscar's face into frame. And then he says something kind of nasty about, like, get the robot out of the way or whatever. And it's, like, instant how much you understand what's going on. It's, like, I don't know, I think it's just a really well-balanced and well-written character and twist. And from that point on, he is such a monster. Like, he properly manipulates Johnny Five into helping him, but his nice guy act is so much more clearly an act. And 10 points to the actor in question, by the way, because he obviously worked at making that, a genuine surprise later in the movie, because he's does such a good job of making you believe Oscar is a nice guy. I don't know. I just think it's one of those things that's just handled really well. And it's weird as well to have a twist that they reveal halfway through the movie and not towards the end. but it works in the film's benefit by a mile for me. I don't know. I don't know if you agree with any of that, or if, like Fred, you think there's some issues.
It's a very effectively written twist. Like, it's, even as an adult watching it for the first time, when that reveal happens, it's genuinely surprising. I was genuinely like, oh shit, like, and I've got it here. So it's about 1 hour 05. So there's still a good 45 minutes of the movie left. And
that's later into the movie than I thought. Huh.
Yeah, I think, mate, I think it's all later in the movie than you think. We spent a lot of time dicking about in New York. It's really effective. Like, the twist absolutely worked on me. I was like, oh shit. Everything you said is right. It's very nicely done.
Yeah, it's great. While I'm here, Chris, did you like that you have a sequel to your favourite moment from the first movie?
What was my favourite moment to the first one?
I say favourite. It's a moment that utterly baffled you, and it was when Ben made an erection joke in the first movie, and you were like, "Is this not supposed to be a movie for kids?" So in the first movie, there's the bit where he repeatedly throws Ali Sheedy's character to the ground, Stephanie to the ground, and he says something like, "I'm sporting tremendous wood," or something like that, and you were like, "That is not acceptable in a kids movie." You really that moment really stuck out to you as like indicative of like many of the film's problems, because it came up quite a few times that they managed to sneak an erection joke in, and this movie sneaks in another one when a slightly drunk Ben talks about Warren G. Hardon instead of Warren G. Harding.
Again though, something about, especially having just watched Dr. Dolittle, where it's a family children's film that's a bit of a comedic romp, and some jokes are aimed more at adults than they are children. It didn't jar with me as much this time, because this one was thick with jokes. It was full of jokes.
Yeah.
And so the idea of some aiming towards adults more than children didn't seem to jar with me as much this time. Although, truth be told, I've not really thought about Short Circuit since we did that podcast. So this may be, misremembering and stuff. But I didn't bump up against that, because I think, again, it's not trying to be E.T. So the more, I can't stress enough, this film's genuinely very funny.
Yeah.
It's full of jokes like that, and I think the more jokes you make, some being geared towards adults, suddenly becomes fine.
Yeah, and it becomes acceptable in a way that in the first movie, the whole vibe of the first movie is kind of like there's something not quite right about it. Whereas it feels like with this movie, they had a better and clearer idea of what kind of movie they were making.
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas I think with the first one, there was a lot of different concepts mixed in that pot, and they didn't all quite gel with each other. So a joke like the hard-on jokes maybe stands out. The sporting tremendous wood joke from the previous movie stands out more than with this one. I do think there is a lot of good jokes in the first movie, but I agree with you. I think the tone of the first movie hurts them often, because it's just they end up either feeling out of place, or they feel like they're from a different movie, because so much of that first movie feels like different kinds and styles of movies bolted to each other in a way that is, I think, less effective than whereas this movie just has this really clear cut, we're going to be like a nice fun family comedy, and that's fine. With a weird turn for tragedy towards the end. I don't think I'll ever get over this. Every time I see it, that sequence where they beat up Johnny Five, that is childhood trauma right there.
Yeah, I imagine so. Yeah. I imagine even now, it's probably still quite painful to watch.
It is when he's telling them not to, they smash his eye. When they hit his eye, Chris. Oh.
Is that the one where it's made to look like blood?
There's two shots like that. So there's the one where he deck in his eye and it all caves in, which is just so upsetting to see. And then there's the one where they hit him right in the sort of torso area where the battery is kept, and the other guy's shirt gets splattered with the battery acid. Those two shots between them, no, thank you.
Yeah.
And that's all obviously then compounded when you later on see him, when you see the state he's in after it, and he can't talk. And when they're in the Radio Shack and Fred first like is getting his voice back on, and he's like, he sounds so weak and pathetic. Oh man, I can't tell you how much they like sell that whole idea of Johnny Five being injured and like not himself. We should talk briefly about Ben, because we haven't talked about it, because as Chris said at the start, we've already said all we need to say about Fisher Stevens. Look, it's deeply unfortunate casting, and it's even more unfortunate in this movie because Ben is the main character, sort of. He's essentially the lead. And as Aziz Ansari pointed out in Master of None, when as a child he watched this movie, seeing a person from India be essentially the lead, and a romantic lead, of a movie like this, not the supporting comedic character he was in the first one, was a big deal.
Yeah.
So it's even more hurtful and shame. It's even more of a pain, like, to me, to think that what seems on the surface like a big step forward for representation on screen in a movie in the 80s is actually
It's a massive step back.
A massive step back, because it's a white dude in brownface, and that is not acceptable.
Yeah.
So I don't want anyone to have listened to this and been like, how have they not really properly addressed this? I just must be stated. Go back and check out our episode for the first one, where we talk about that a lot. But I also want to bring it up back here again, just to say that it's even more problematic here for me, because otherwise this movie would have been, this isn't Apu from The Simpsons, where he's not the lead character of the show. Ultimately, they've been able to write Apu out of The Simpsons, right, and fix the problem, right? You don't have this movie without Ben. He's the lead character, and it would have been such a huge thing to have an Indian lead character in a major motion picture in that time, and the fact they chose to cast a white guy to play him is really a shame. And it's actually, I would repeat that it is more of a problem here in that context than in the first one.
Yeah, and it's kind of, it's heartbreaking because it's a great performance. Like, awful accent aside,
yeah,
he's putting a lot of heart into it, which makes it, which gives it another. It's not worse than the insane, how insanely uncorrect it is, how disheartening it is, because it means it's a wasted opportunity to give that role to someone who isn't wearing makeup to do it. All of those things are worse, but it also kicks you in the teeth because it's like, this man wasted his energy because you're just so distracted by the obscenity of it and the fact that it's so wrong that it affects your judgment when, he had a job to do and was trying his best. And, we can say now, if this was today, you could quite fairly go, the actor should never have taken the job. It's not right that wasn't the attitude at the time. It's not right that he didn't say that and no one said that. But that is the reality of the time,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm getting my point across.
No, I think you are. I think you're saying, like, these days you would say what actor would be, there is an element of responsibility on the actor to not take roles like that when they're offered, because if no actor takes the role meant for another group, then they'll be forced. You force the studios into casting the people they should be casting, right? We've seen this in animation quite a bit recently, where a couple of different actors have stepped back from roles they were playing because they thought the role should go to a character with essentially a matching ethnicity. This has happened on Central Park with Kristen Bell, and it's happened on what's the Netflix one? The Netflix animated show.
I can't remember.
Damn, that's gonna kill me now. Big Mouth. Big Mouth. So it happened on the Netflix show Big Mouth as well, where they let one of the characters essentially be recast. The actor in question, pulled back from the role, and let someone else take it over. So yeah, you're right. In a modern day, you would certainly put an amount of that to the actor. And look, even forgetting the performance side of it, it's written. He is in places written as a bad Indian stereotype, like on paper.
Yeah,
as
completely.
Well. So there are other problems beyond the casting as well. This character was always going to be, this exaggerated idea of the time. But I think I'd have felt a lot more comfortable with that if they'd have at least let an Indian actor play the role, because I understand that in those days stereotypes were just how the vast majority of people saw them, and I understand, and I think I would forgive them more for the casting, or for those choices, if the casting had at least been right, because then you're at least going, okay, this isn't great, and it's reinforcing some potentially hurtful stereotypes, but at least someone got a fucking job out of it. You know what I mean? At least Indian kids might see, a character from India in a lead in a movie and have that hope that Aziz talks about in Master of None, in that episode. So yeah, it's massively problematic in many places. But to sort of address that, so I can now put it in a box and say, look, we're acknowledging that's terrible in many, many ways, from the accent to the way he mispronounces certain words to the to the casting of a white dude in a box. That bad, right? Like, just put that aside. The Ben character in this movie, otherwise, it's actually handled really well, and that's what makes all that really frustrating. They bump him up to the lead, and they give him a really good plot that parallels Johnny Five's about feeling outside, feeling like an outsider in America as an immigrant and striving for his citizenship. And while it doesn't get the attention it probably could have gotten, because I do think it could have maybe been elaborated on in a more. It's still a reasonably strong recurring element to his character, and the payoff in the end is him finally getting his citizenship with Johnny Five, who, by the way, we'll talk about this later, but is gold for some reason now. And even as a kid, I did not understand why he was gold in that final scene. I still don't.
No, that's very bizarre, and it feels it changes the appearance so drastically that it almost feels like a different character.
It's weird. I think the idea is like that's his version of putting on a suit. I dressed in gold today, to go to my swearing in or whatever. But I'm gonna put this I'll put that aside for a second, because I have many questions about his citizenship. I want to come back to that, if that's okay. But the Ben character, I think, is handled really well. I think he comes across as sweet and caring, a little lost, and I think he does come across as like somebody who's struggled in America. He'd been working for this big robotics company, and it's almost pointing out like systemic racism a little bit, because like this is a guy with this is a very common story of immigrants coming from countries where they're very qualified and have sort of well paid, skilled work. In his case, he's a mechanical engineer, roboticist. I don't know the exact term for what his job is supposed to be in these movies is, but he worked for Nova Robotics, helped build Johnny Five. I mean, the guy's clearly a fucking genius, and here he is shilling toys on the street next to a guy selling fake Rolexes, and him working his way up, as a struggling businessman in a society like that, while being ignored by this girl that he likes, and relating to Johnny Five's feeling of isolation and loneliness, and particularly the scene where they talk on the pier after Johnny Five has been arrested, and they explain he explains the loneliness he feels to Johnny Five, so that Johnny Five becomes almost automatically not alone in that other people feel lonely. There's a comfort in knowing you're not alone in your loneliness. I know that sounds weird, but the movie sort of looks at that. That's remarkable. That's like a genuine attempt at insight into the immigrant experience. It's not particularly subtle. It's not particularly finessed, but it's more than any other movie from this era, I think, can say. Well, not maybe any other, but like a lot of major blockbusters from this era would have said, and particularly kids' films, which definitely didn't deal with that sort of stuff. So there's there's a lot of harm done with the Ben character, as we've established and put in a box. There's also a lot of good done. And that's really what's frustrating about rewatching this movie in a modern era. I think he's a really well-rounded character. I think at all points his intentions are clear. He comes across very sweet. I do think Fisher Stevens does a good job, stereotypes aside, at giving the character heart and making him as believable as possible. And I think even the choice to make him the lead character was a bold one and a good one, casting and all the problematic stuff aside. So yeah, it's a very mixed bag, because I've got some very strong feelings about the character that are positive, and I've also got some very strong feelings about the choices made around the character that I feel very negatively about. So it's tricky, but he is the heart of the movie, and his relationship with Johnny Five is kind of adorable, to be honest with you.
And like you say, the cheap version of this film is to not make him the lead character, because whilst, and I'm fascinated to know how you responded to this as a kid, because whilst it's got the cute, zany robot, it's 20 minutes till the robot appears. The film is about Ben.
Yeah.
And tangentially Fred to some degree. But Ben's the heart of this film for me, not even Johnny Five. And
yes,
that in itself, it shows effort and shows a certain amount of trying on behalf of the creators. They didn't just, Johnny Five goes to New York City and it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, which is what this movie could have been. There's a version of this movie where it opens with Johnny Five or the box on a plane, bobbing about in the cargo hold. The box gets slid off the thing and it starts hopping about, and then he bursts out and he's in the city and it's chaos, and then he finds Ben. There's a version of this movie that does that, and it's worse. It's much worse.
Yeah,
it's a good question though, and I wondered that, and I wish I could have a conversation with young Dan about this, because watching this back this time with an attempt at a critical eye open, again, very hard to open that eye with this movie for me personally. I have to just acknowledge that. I wondered the same thing. I was watching it going, wow, it's a long time till Johnny Five shows up. What captured my imagination about this film? Because it is essentially, to start with, a story about a guy trying to sell toys and a sleazy Del Boy style businessman, trying to take advantage of the offer he's gotten to sell these toys to Samson's and see if he can get it on there. And then he goes to a loan shark and gets money. And then there's these two guys they've pissed off, so they trash all their kit and they lose all their staff. The first 20 minutes of this movie are just not rompy at all. What was so engrossing about it? And I genuinely don't have the answer, sadly. I do think what helps is that it starts with the playful sequence with the toy Johnny Five loose in the department store, which I think is quite fun and funny and light. And in this era when title sequences had to go up front, a lot of them were really fucking boring. I remember when we complained about the one from the very first episode of the show, the Space Jam one, where it's the movie starts as a scene and then there's 5 to 8 minutes, I think, of just fucking opening credits. It seems like that. It's probably only 3 or 4, but feels like fucking forever of
I seem to remember I didn't have as much of a problem with it because it's such a bitchin' tune.
It's a great song, but it just goes on and on. Yeah, it is a good song. To turn the title sequence into the toy thing in this, I think works really well. But I my only explanation for you, Chris, is that I did genuinely, you like Ben so much, and you kind of like Fred too. You kind of want them to succeed, and when they get their stuff destroyed, you do feel quite bad for them. You do weirdly, definitely get invested in their success in this toy thing they're doing. Even forgetting that then a giant robot shows up and causes havoc. I said, I'd almost watch that movie too. The one where Johnny Five doesn't show up.
There's a really good balance of even when they're kind of having their heart to heart and bonding when they've been kidnapped and put in the freezer, the dialogue and stuff is there for you and I now, and young Dan was probably entertained by the fact that they were really cold and had icicles hanging off them. Do you know what I mean? It's they do a good balance of it. Let's because I've only got one other note. Let's talk about Gold, Johnny Five, and in general. It feels like you didn't want Johnny Five to become a citizen of Toronto. Is that not the case? What's going on?
Of Toronto, USA. It's not that I didn't want him to. It's that as an adult, as a cynical adult who knows a bit more about politics. Kid Dan was thrilled by that ending. Worth noting. Putting that out there right now. Loved it. Glorious. He gets to be a citizen. Adult Dan is like, well, that's just not. No, they'd have to go through Congress. They'd have to they're not.
Mate, no, it's a movie where a robot digs through concrete in like a day. Like, I'm sorry.
No, I know. Look, suspension of disbelief.
You cannot pick and choose your logistics battles there. Like,
it's just this judge is like, oh, well, so wait, you're telling me that if a robot tomorrow stopped bank robbers in America from getting away with some diamonds, that the country would love him and make him a citizen?
No, well, I think if Batman versus Superman teaches us anything, it's that, people will always, if they have the power to destroy us, Dan, then we must assume they will. Or whatever I just
understand that, like, American citizenship is obviously a big deal to Americans, and who gets it is obviously a political issue, and it doesn't escape adult Dan that the people on the right want to make that as difficult as possible. They don't want anyone just to come into their country, quote marks, and like become a citizen, therefore getting certain benefits. But they also, we've got people on the left who are like a little bit more open to the idea of like, it's a country. America particularly is a country built on immigration. It's a country of immigrants. The idea that immigration shouldn't be a big part of the way that they improve their country, build their country, bring in more cultures, bring in more things, is a popular idea on the other side, the left. So the idea that he stopped a bank robber and they were just like, yeah, we'll pull all the political stuff aside, we'll just let him become a citizen without running any tests proving he's alive. It's a robot telling everyone he's alive. Like, what, they believed it because he stopped a bank robber? I find it hard to believe as an adult that anyone believes he's alive for a start because of him just stopping a bank robbery. But I also find it hard to believe that they'd have managed to get that politically through anywhere. It's a complicated issue, is what I'm saying.
Dan, the robot zip-lined his way across the ocean and captured a criminal is point one. Point two is that Donald Trump, host of The Apprentice, became president of the United States, and Jared Leto, lead singer of 30 Seconds to Mars, has an Oscar. What I'm saying, Dan, is all bets are off.
Do you think they should take that back off Jared Leto after Zack Snyder's Justice League? I think they might have to.
I don't blame Jared Leto that much for that scene. I'll tell you what really winds me up about that scene. The amount of people that are like, oh my God, it was just so amazing to see Ben Affleck's Batman and Jared Leto's Joker together. And it's like, but I've never seen a scene in my life that made me go, but these two clearly aren't together.
Yeah. Sorry to have turned our Short Circuit 2 review into a Zack Snyder's Justice League review, but yeah, I agree. That scene is shot in a way that it's just like, it's absolutely incomprehensible that anybody could watch that scene and not feel the awkwardness and stiltedness of two actors that literally never met. Like,
so my other note, my one remaining note, because we've talked about naturally all my notes, is so Ben gets arrested.
Yes.
And then another report comes in indicating there's a robot. And the police just go, well, this guy must be telling the truth. We better go on a mad, crazy scheme to try and find this robot together. What makes the police suddenly believe Benny?
I don't think it's. I've thought about this too. I've had questions about this, and over the years, the conclusion I've come to, and this is fansplaining. So once again, this doesn't discredit your criticism. It's a valid criticism. But the explanation I've come to over the years is that actually they're not letting Ben off. He's in the back of that police car. They're just going, well, we're going to go after this robot because he's causing chaos. We know the robot was made by this guy. So we're going to bring him with us in the back of our car and he can help us track it down. And we'll figure all the rest out afterwards. That's my That's my understanding of what happens. But yeah, you're right. It's kind of insane. The police is just like, oh, you're the robot guy. Come on. And then also that they drag the poor guy that runs the fucking the Radio Shack.
I know, that made me laugh. That made me laugh a lot. Because that guy fucked up. That guy took there's a football match on or something, and he closed the Radio Shack, and then has been found out. So he wants to be able to say to his higher ups, "Oh, well, I wasn't just closing it to watch the World Cup. It was for this reason. I won't name the shop, but I worked in a shop, and someone shut it to watch England play in the World Cup and took a massive bollocking for it."
I'll bet. Well, what's funny about that is that I've got questions about that in general, actually. There's a bit of inconsistency with the Radio Shack anyway, because it's clearly a Radio Shack, like a Radio Shack branded store, right? Like, it's at no
point... There's a sign that's like, it says Radio Shack rear entrance.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yet the guy that runs it is supposed to be the guy from earlier in the movie that had his own store that was, I'm in a panic, I'm manic, I'm manic, that guy. It's supposed to be him.
Oh, yeah.
But he obviously, that advert was clearly for a guy that had his own store and was doing loads of deals. Like, in fact, I wonder if I can bring up the scene quickly. Yeah, so is it not supposed to be him? Is there some inconsistency there? I don't know. I'm
just takes a lot of pride in his Radio Shack. Did
he went on public access to promote the show, to promote his Radio Shack? Like, they allowed him to do that? Like, wouldn't there have been a national marketing campaign for a Radio Shack?
Oh, here we go. I've got it here. Hold on.
Like I've just pulled it up as well. For those listening, I'm about 21 minutes into the movie, and Johnny Five's he's watching Tarzan and Building Robots, and then Ben's reading his. There you go. Yeah, that's the guy. Let me listen to the dialogue and see what he says.
Yeah, because it doesn't say. Does it name the store?
I just got a sample. Whoa! I admit it. I need therapy, but till I'm cured, you can save big. So come on.
He just says you can save big. What's the start of the advert?
Wait,
it says Radio Shack. Okay.
Like I said,
yeah, because the font is Radio Shack, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's the all-new Radio Shack stereo, and just look at these prices. You're right, it says Radio Shack right there in the opening. All right.
We got products that could fix a robot.
Yeah. Well, Radio Shack Radio Shack is called Radio Shack, but obviously all it sells is like electronics and electronic components. So it's like, it's... Yeah. I assume they've got... They would have most basic electronic equipment you would need in a Radio Shack. They don't just sell stereos. It's worth noting. Which I guess that is worth adding, actually, for people who live in the UK, because in the UK we never had Radio Shack, so I guess... The only reason I know what Radio Shack sells beyond stereos is because there used to be a show called King of the Nerds, which I really enjoyed. And in the, I think, second season, they got a sponsorship with Radio Shack, and they let them go into like the Radio Shack build room, where it was full of like parts for them to build shit with. That's the only reason I know that Radio Shack sells more than radios.
I'm thoroughly enjoying what a love of a film will do. You're like, no, Chris, doesn't matter how many times you mention it, all right? The Radio Shack could have provided the equipment. What I don't believe is that the government and the political parties would allow a robot to become... all right.
I mean, look, that's just like... I guess that's my own like cynical like political view like influencing for sure, because yeah, you're right. As a kid I definitely was like, that's great, he gets to be a citizen. Like, I never questioned it.
It works. That's the thing. Regardless of how, and like I say, for me there's a lot of fucking weird there's a lot of unexplained shit in this family film, and that's fine. That one for me, it is absolutely, even as an adult, worth the because it's such an effective story plot. Like, I could see someone watching this whole film and not seeing the parallels between Ben and Johnny Five, and in that scene going, "Oh, cool!" Like, it brings everything together. Yep. It's a very clever choice. That.
Yeah.
Did you have any other notes before?
Yeah, just a couple of small things that I say small things. They're big things, but they're the sort of things that are done so well you don't actually notice them when you're watching the movie, that you want to give credit to. We haven't talked about it, but the puppeteering in this movie is fucking flawless. Johnny Five, as a practical effect, there are no seams. like in the first one, we talked about the couple of times they tried to use like stop motion or compositing to make the shots work. Particularly the scene where Johnny accidentally crushes that grasshopper when he's hopping in the front lawn. You can sort of see this. It looks wonky. It doesn't look right. I don't think there was a special effect in this movie that I particularly like saw the seams of. Did you? It's
No,
incredible.
not at all. No.
And the way he moves, they've really mastered by this movie, bringing the character to life in a way that matches the voice. So in the first one, it's all a bit muddled because he's basically just come to life and he hasn't even figured out who he is yet, and his character shifts as the movie goes on because he's only a day old in that movie for the first chunk. He doesn't even really understand like what a joke is until later in the movie. So you forgive that in the first movie, but he's developed such a strong sense of character by this movie, personality, I should say. The way they puppet him really adds to that. So the way he moves and talks, the combination of the puppeteering and the voice actor basically is just a perfect marriage. He really does in parts feel alive. And it's kind of amazing because he shouldn't at all. And also on a very, I think quite a lean budget. This is like an $18 million movie.
Oh, wow.
Not a lot of money, certainly not by today's standards, but I don't even think by the standards of the day that was a huge amount of money. And it's incredible. I mean, he looks and moves so flawlessly throughout this entire film. I think like 12 people were required to operate the full Johnny, the head to toe version, and make him function and move and his eyes and all that stuff. And they do a stunning job. They really do. It's incredible.
It's brilliant.
Then the other thing I wanted to compliment, and this is the one where I go, this could be nostalgia. This could be one of the worst things about the movie. But I fucking love the music in this movie. It's incredibly 80s. Don't get me wrong.
80s?
It's the most 80s music ever. Like, this the fucking everything about it. But it's so good at conveying tone. It's really good at being sad in the sort of sadder scenes where Johnny's feeling, sad about not being accepted, or when he's being beaten up towards the end of the movie. But it's so good at being joyful when he's just getting into scrapes around the city. So, I love it. And again, that I don't know if you want to come in and account of this, because there's a part of me that wonders if that's just this music has been a big part of like my impression of this movie, because I've seen this movie so many times and I know all that music inside and out. Maybe I'm just blinded by nostalgia there. So I don't know.
No, because I think the music makes me feel nostalgic for 80s, early 90s movies.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? I just associated it with films like this, and I think it just, if anything, it just helped my enjoyment of it. I could see someone going the other way. I could see someone watching it and being like, oh, Jesus, we got another jazz interlude. But yeah, I didn't bump up against that at all.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Good. Yeah. Okay. So I'm not a crazy person. Sweet. Have you got any other notes, or did you tackle your last?
No.
one?
No. That's me noted out.
Cool. So should we jump into the triv?
Let's do it, man.
Let's wrap this bad boy up. There isn't a lot of triv. It's worth noting that this movie, generally speaking, not a lot of post-movie existing stuff. Like the DVD copy that I've got is extremely sparse. It has, on the box, they say a behind-the-scenes featurette, but when you go on it, it's behind-the-scenes featurette / like discussion with Fisher Stevens, and it's like 4 minutes long, and it is mostly Fisher Stevens talking about how fun it was to play Ben, and then with a few behind the scenes shots. It's not a little behind the scenes documentary at all. It doesn't really go into how they made the movie and anything, and there's just been almost no real information since about, like, they you know what I mean? No one's ever released like a little documentary on it on a subsequent DVD. It's just not a film that gets revisited, so there is almost no information about this. Like the IMDb trivia page is almost the polar opposite to the Star Wars ones. It was.
I'd love to see Fisher Stevens talking about it now.
I think he has. I don't know 100% what he said, but I think he said that. I think they asked him about it a few years ago, and obviously he said he wouldn't come back as Ben, but he did say that he would if they do a remake at any point or a sequel, because they've talked about it multiple times over the years. There was talk of it in 2013 of like a plot where a young boy finds Johnny Five in like a scrapyard or something like that. I don't know, which would be a weird thing after the ending of this one, because by the end of this one he's both famous and an American citizen, so I don't know how that would work. But Fisher Stevens has sort of been asked about it and said, look, if they did another one, I would love to do a little cameo, not as Ben, but like, just show up in the movie at some point just as a little nod. So he's he obviously had a good time with the franchise and has fond memories of it. So but he equally, I think he made it clear he wouldn't necessarily reprise Ben, which I think that indicates.
Quite right.
I think that indicates. Yeah. But I do think as well, equally sort of not problematic, but like I think he has said as well in the past, he's kind of defended it and gone, well, look, at the time it was different, which still isn't really much of an excuse. So I suppose, it's a complicated issue. Anyway, so apparently when they were in the early stages of development of this film, they were wanting Steve Guttenberg to come back, who played Newton Crosby in the first movie, the primary creator of Johnny Five, but he wouldn't commit to the sequel without a script, and they didn't have one ready at the time, so he completely declined. 20 years later, Guttenberg has multiple times expressed in interviews that he regretted turning down the chance to be in this movie, having seen it. So that's quite interesting. Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. That's how that played out. Also, Ali Sheedy, who played Stephanie in the first one, was approached to come back, but it was a smaller role, and apparently she wanted quite a lot of money to do it, so they deemed her a bit too expensive to have back in the movie. So they paid her a much smaller amount to just do that small voice cameo from the opening of the movie. So for those who don't remember, when Johnny Five first shows up, he has a letter from Stephanie and he reads it in her voice, which is actually a really nice moment. But it would have been nice to actually see Ali Sheedy. But then again, would that have not distracted from leaving Ben as our lead?
Yeah, I think the voice was enough. Make it clear they're not coming back, and I'm glad they didn't end up coming back in a way, because I wouldn't have, especially if it was Steve Guttenberg on his own, because it's like I don't want anything to undercut the ending of the first one. So
yeah, where they went off to live on a farm together. Yeah,
I think this is better than what we would have got.
Yes, agreed. I think it worked out for the best. There's a little section of trivia here called "Where the fuck are they?" Toronto, USA, apparently. The location of the city in the film is never spoken, but is hinted at being New York City through various statements in the characters, particularly the moment when Sandy is doing Ben's musical clue game. To find him, they refer to on Broadway. So then, that's obviously a big hint to it being New York. But during the climax of the film, Johnny Five apparently says suspect vehicle turning east on Lakeshore, and they cut to a shot of Lakeshore Boulevard, which is a place in Toronto.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the travel guide has a bridge from St. Louis on as well.
You have absolutely nailed it. And to confuse things further, Oscar gives number 5 a tourism guide with St. Louis on the cover. So where this movie is supposed to be set, fuck knows.
It's fucking crazy.
We talked about it a little bit, actually. We should probably cover the musical game thing. Is insane, by the way. I don't think I ever, because you talked about it in the middle of a wider point, but when you were talking about Sandy's character in general,
Sandy and Ben, yeah.
But yeah, like, what are you doing, movie? Like, that makes no sense that she finds. Like, I can't. To this day, the odds that like, even as a kid, I think I was like, it seems weird she'd work out all these clues. It's actually quite a clever. Go on.
But even be that invested.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly.
So much water to make up for choking. I'm gonna nip to the loo quickly. But yeah, I really didn't want to interrupt another podcast with me nipping to the loo, but I had to down like an entire glass of water to get over the choking. Be that invested, it makes sense. You just think you must have been someone like, don't go home at 5 that day. Stay until 6 and come up with an alternative idea.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of like the notion of, we'll send a clue through the music, because it's sort of because what they're trying to do is, obviously they have this scene earlier in the movie where Ben and Sandy connect over music, and it is one scene and it's very short, and it's something they probably should have done more with to make this idea work. And the idea that their connection through music is what helps her find him. On paper, is nice. It's sweet. It sort of links. It's very indicative of what relationship we've established for those two characters. In practice, because the establishing of that relationship and it being very based in the a joint love of music or whatever, which is fine, but it's thin. So then by date 2, when she's chasing him down with his musical clues, it just seems ridiculous. It doesn't really function properly at all, because they haven't had the time to embed it in enough. But again, I see how they got there, because again, on the surface, it ties in a way that makes a lot of sense and works. I don't think Chris is back yet, so I'll just move on to the next trivia point. You see, he's coming back, guys. He's on his way back.
Yeah, no, maybe because I just want to make the point that the taxi driver getting invested in it is fun, though.
Yes, that is quite a fun little bit, because he's obviously very knowledgeable about music himself. That's a great little bit. We haven't really explained what it was, have we, for anyone else that's seen it? So for those who don't remember, I mean, just to clarify, because we've talked about it multiple times and not really explained it, Ben's trapped in a freezer, and he gets attached. He attaches with his calculator to a phone line somehow, and he can't talk because it's not got a receiver, but he can put beeps through. So he sends her musical clues as to where he is. By the way, what bloody luck that Chinese restaurant was called Duwa's, and there's obviously a song called Duwadi. If that Chinese restaurant had been called anything else, they'd have been fucked.
No, not necessarily. Not if it was called, I don't know, Bohemian Rhapsody. It'd have been alright.
Would it?
If it was called Twist and Shout, fine.
Do you know many Chinese
Yellow
restaurants
Submarine
called Twist and Shout?
No, I don't know.
What year did Bohemian Rhapsody come out as a song?
Bohemian Rhapsody was the 70s. So if I was to guess now, 79, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That was amazing. If I was to guess now, 79, yeah, 79, that was what I was going to guess.
No, as you were saying it, I was already, I just looked at it, the small delay on the phone lines cost us there, I think.
I very deliberately chose songs from the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, you did very well. So there you go. So yeah, I think it's a good sequence, but it does fall down on believability as it goes. When Johnny Five gears up at the Radio Shack and gets ready to go after Oscar and the thugs, he gives himself a mohawk, which is indeed a reference to the movie Taxi Driver from '87. I forgot that was in the trivia, so there you go. The scene where Oscar and his thugs attack and smash Johnny Five to pieces was voted as one of the saddest film scenes of all time. It's true. It's nuts to me. This doesn't strike me as a film that is remembered and talked about.
No. That's how horrific that scene is.
Yeah.
The fact that it made it into that list, the fact that someone remembered enough to include it there says a lot.
Yeah, I'd agree. And several people, by the look of it, says voted in. Yeah, so 100% agreed. Yeah, it is a horrific scene. There were 5 robots used for filming the Johnny Five character. But apparently several complications arose with the various hydraulic and electronical systems due to the rainy and cold weather they had in Toronto during production. So yeah, he was a malfunction-y fella. So it was a good job they had 5. I guess whenever one broke down while it was being repaired, they'd switch out to one of the others. I think my understanding as well is they have lots of Johnny Five bits. I think they have a Head and Shoulders version if they just want to frame the top bit of Johnny Five. They also have a lot of loose arms, cool. So if they want to do shots of him picking stuff off from a table, there's an easy to control puppeted arm where you simply push it into frame and then pull back a little lever and it grabs. So you can use that for shots of him picking up stuff. So it's I only know that from just bits I've sort of seen in some of the bits of behind the scene footage they've released. Again, nothing official because there's fucking no information about this movie anywhere. The movie actually was originally going to be titled Short Circuit 2 More Input, and apparently a lot of the early promotional material had that as a subtitle, and then it was dropped before release. Very much like the very famous example we had a couple episodes ago. We talked about Revenge of the Jedi, Return of the Jedi, only no one knows that because who cares?
More input, yeah?
What's that, sir?
I've just seen if I can see a poster or anything. So more input.
Yeah, it's a good. I didn't actually look that up myself. That's a good.
Oh,
point.
there's one where it's underneath, but it's in like quote marks. Although this poster's amazing because it's got nothing to do with the film. It says "Success will never spoil" #5, and it's him on a pool, like taking a phone call.
Yes, that one. So that poster is very famous, and it actually is. It's in Community. It's in our beds.
Right.
That poster is like quite like a. That is like a nerd beloved poster. You know, it's like it's in our bed's room in thingy. I've seen it in multiple things show up as like one of those ways they make a nerd look like a nerd. Or we like Short Circuit, that slightly obscure movie about a robot from the 80s. It's like a quick shorthand for making them look like a fucking douchebag. And it always makes me go, oh, I like that movie. The cover I have, which I'll put in the which I'll put as part of the thumbnail for this, is a harder one to come by. So the cover that was on the VHS I had as a child is not the commonly used cover. And it's just Johnny Five peeking out from behind the wall, and the background is just sort of blue. And there's like a really badly photoshopped, there's like still one person you can see over his shoulder randomly. And it just says in the top corner, some say he's nuts. Some say he's bolts, but can #5 make it in the big bad city? ? And then underneath it says, keep your wires crossed.
To be fair to you, I'm looking at that now. To be fair to you, the 2 is kind of hidden behind the words Short Circuit.
Yeah, like it.
Especially at 5 or 6, you could have mistaken that for just a symbol.
Yeah, look at it. You're right. Actually, that's a really good point. It's that cover is not the popular cover though. I found this out when I was trying to find that one the other day. I was like, it's Short Circuit 2 cover, and there's one with a green background, which is the modern cover that they use.
Yeah, that looks much better.
That's the copy. That's the cover they use on like modern day versions of the DVD. But like, yeah, if you go back, 1 second, the one that was actually on most people's copy of it, it seems, was him and Ben sticking out from the manhole cover, or the one of him with the city in the background with his arm up, with where the bandana's more visible.
Yeah.
Anyway,
nice.
So
all good posters.
There are more trivia. There's got to be more. Oh yeah. So the movie's budget was around 15 million. I think I said 18 earlier. It was 15, even less than I thought. A lot of which was spent on the Johnny Five robots. Apparently, I think I read somewhere that on the first movie they spent like 1 million of the film's budget on the Johnny Fives. I mean, in this movie they spent something like, I think it was 2.5 million. On the Johnny Five robots, I think I read. I didn't know that down, but so sorry if that's incorrect. The movie, sadly, did not perform very well at the box office, which is why a sequel never happened. They were in the planning stages or looking at the options for a third one. In the box office, it landed 7th place in its first weekend, only making 3.8 million. It closed with 21 million. Which is almost half of what the first one made, and it ranked 45th in the US box office for that year. Ouch.
Yeah, but it's such a shame, isn't it? Because you hear 45th, and part of you goes, it's not that bad. Like, but yeah, I suppose compared to the first one.
Well, 45th of the year. 44 films made more money than this one.
Yeah, but, think about how many didn't. That's what I'm saying.
Under the 10, maybe? I
I'd
don't know.
take it, Dan. If you and I made a film, and it was the 45th highest grossing film of the year, I'd take it.
1 second. I really desperately need the toilet, but I need to look this up.
What was the highest grossing film of like? Well, you got to go 2019.
No. I want to look up how many films came out that year, because I reckon it was probably about 50, and this basically came last. That's what I'm trying to identify. But no, the highest grossing film of that year was Rain Man, apparently, and then Who Framed Roger Rabbit just behind it. And then Coming to America. I desperately need the toilet, Chris. I'm now very concerned. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you out the question for the week.
Yeah, well, just to say, it had a tough time because I believe Die Hard came out the week after this film.
Yeah, that probably didn't help at all. I know. I need to make a move here, so bear with me. Let me find this question quickly, and then. So we've had some questions come in, but Jackie has asked that Jackie one has asked us several questions, and what I'm going to do, she's doing a quick fire round. Like she's done this before, where she's given us two things to compare, and it's this or this, right? So what I'll do is every time I don't have a question ready or we've not got one left, I'm going to dip back to this selection because she's given us like 8 of these, I think. So, Chris, very quickly before I come back and we can wrap up our thoughts on Short Circuit, but we'll do our Patreon question for the week from that Jackie one: Sabrina the Teenage Witch or Clarissa Explains It All. Go.
Cool. I will answer that while you Peter. Can you still hear me? Yeah, you can still hear me. So, also though, before you do that, before I answer that question, the 49th highest grossing film of 2019 was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which I'd view as a success. However, equally, the 44th, which I think is actually the number of Short Circuit 2, was Terminator Dark Fate, and above that is Dark Phoenix, of which I wouldn't name them successes. So, fair enough. Right, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, absolutely. Clarissa Explains It All, I watched occasionally, and it was quite amusing, if memory serves. I remember, the trouble is, I didn't watch Clarissa Explains It All until it was this is the first show that the girl from Sabrina the Teenage Witch did. That's how I viewed it in my head. Melissa Joan Hart, obviously. I have to say Sabrina. A part of me always resents Sabrina slightly because it would just trash Kenan and Kel when they did vote days on Nickelodeon and stuff. And it obviously made SMT a huge success, which shat on Live and Kicking, which I hold a special place in my heart because of Kenan and Kel, and in general. But I think the better show was definitely Sabrina. And I think if you were to say to me, right, you have to watch a season of Clarissa Explains It All or Sabrina the Teenage Witch, what are you going to watch? I would go Sabrina the Teenage Witch every time. I think Salem, is an iconic character. The aunts and Sabrina and Harvey are all very well remembered. And actually, Clarissa Explains It All is probably best remembered as the show that Melissa Joan Hart was in before Sabrina the Teenage Witch, where she sat on the windowsill. Maybe I'm being unfair. But yeah,
I'm back.
Go Sabrina.
I think Sabrina's the better show too, but I really loved Clarissa Explains It All as well. I thought that was a really fun show. I liked both quite a lot. I think the only reason Sabrina gets one over on it is because Clarissa Explains It All is kind of like a pretty standard family sitcom. It's just about young girl, sort of dealing with young teen girl problems. What boys she likes, that sort of stuff. And it was just it's quite pedestrian. It's very funny, likable characters, but nothing particularly out of the ordinary for the time. It's in that era where a lot of shows did that in the wake of Saved by the Bell, I guess. Whereas I think Sabrina had this whole sort of fantasy side to it because it was a teenage girl, but her problems were very much relating to her powers and weird magic and stuff, and that just instantly makes it much more engaging and interesting because it's there weren't many shows in the realm of sitcom that had supernatural elements. So I as a kid, that immediately just attracted me to Sabrina over Clarissa as a show. Although again, I definitely saw many episodes of Clarissa and enjoyed them. But I agree with you. I think Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
I remember being very blown away by it at the time by the special effects. By being oh, you can do this in a sitcom?
Yeah, right. It did stand out, didn't it? Especially in a world where Kenan and Kel was clearly made on the lowest budget of budgets. It was comparatively, it was kind of amazing.
We don't need to shit on Kenan and Kel.
I'm not shitting on Kenan and Kel. I'm complimenting Kenan and Kel. It's incredible that Kenan and Kel was as good as it was on what was evidently the most shoestring budget ever. They're you've got 2 sets. Yeah. You can have 2 sets. Yeah. You get a third one every now and then. We'll give you the cinema. We'll let you.
It did have the special effect of the curtain going back and revealing the set, and then you being like, "How does that logistically work? Is the other set behind a wall? Like, what's going on here?"
I guess, but yeah, it's different shows. To quickly counter your point, by the way, you can't really compare to modern times in terms of like what was the 40 odd,
I know,
because a lot more films come out now than then, so the standards are.
But you didn't find a figure, did you, for how many films?
No, I was because who lists the number of films?
Well, forgive the manic clicking then, but let me see if I can go back. So, what year is it?
88. I was curious as to like how many films came below it if you got the full list.
Yeah, well, I got this. I'm seeing how far back this numbers thing goes. So we're on 96. So that suggests it's going to go back. 88, did you say?
The year 88. Yeah. Because
So
I've got it here as being so. I could work it out actually. Oh, it's a bit of a pain.
See, I can't even see Short Circuit 2 on this list, but.
Yeah, there's no easy way to work this out. Looking at it,
well, according to this list, but this list doesn't have short 88. Yeah,
the year was.
Sorry,
88,
I'm on 89. Yeah. Hold on. Ah, there we go. Right. So according to this list, Short Circuit 2 is 45th, and then there's 237 films in total. So there's a fair few below it.
Okay.
And that's
surprising.
But I guess 237.
It's also a bad metric because obviously because it also depends on like budget versus profit. Like a movie that earned as much as so if a movie was only made for $4 million and made as much as Short Circuit, that's a hit. But it would be in the same position as Short Circuit in the yearly chart. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So there's no. So
I
guess there's no real way to actually check how like. Where it lands in terms of like its profitability.
I'm just saying that the people that made I Hate Actors, which had a gross of $3,765 and 916 tickets sold, were probably quite jealous of Short Circuit's $20 million and 5 million tickets sold.
You've got me there. I mean, to wrap up Short Circuit, I guess, like, I still love this movie. I have to acknowledge so much of it is nostalgia, but I was thrilled to hear that you found stuff to like in this movie, because I was genuinely worried I was gonna like have my sort of illusion shattered about whether this was a viable feature or not. Do you know what I mean? Like I was a bit worried that I was gonna discover this treasured thing was actually a piece of shit.
Yeah, no, I don't think it is. Blimey, Bambi and Dirty Dancing both below Short Circuit 2.
Really?
Yeah.
I bet Bambi didn't cost a bloody 15 million to make though.
and Cinderella, Jesus.
Yeah, but I mean, let me have it. Let me.
Anyway, we could go down a massive rabbit hole here, but yeah. No, I thought it was a lot of fun, and I don't think it was.
Yeah, Bambi cost 800,000 to make. Bambi cost less than $1 million to make.
Yeah. I mean, like you say, it's all relative, isn't it? I'm just saying. I'd take it if I made a film. If I travelled back in time, Dan, and chose to use that time to make a film just to rival Short Circuit 2, which I think we'd all agree would be a poor use of time travel, I'd be happy with around the 40s. I think it's a fun movie, and I feel like that's potentially all it needs to be, and potentially, but maybe not, all it was trying to be. I think there's a lot of emotive stuff in there. The lines between Ben's loneliness and Johnny Five's loneliness, the arc of Fred, the twist of Oscar. I think there's a lot of genuinely clever, interesting stuff. And it was funny. I honestly thoroughly, especially compared to the first one, really enjoyed myself.
Yeah, and obviously, fucking get me some fucking banging I Need a Hero song,
yes.
Bonnie Tyler, like the use of that song at the end is both insanely ridiculous, but also so much fun.
Lengthy intro. Felt like they'd extended the intro, like to make you go, are they going to do it? Is it going to... Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, for those who don't remember when Johnny chases down Oscar in the final section of the film, they play "I Need a Hero" under it, and it's insanely kick-ass, but it shouldn't be. Like, nothing about it works, but it does. I don't know.
Well, it was in the first film as well, wasn't it? That song.
No, I don't believe so.
No, they're not. I thought it was.
The first one they had that song, "Who's Johnny?" she said. You know that one from DeBarge.
Ah, yeah. Yeah, fair enough.
Anyway,
Cool.
If you'd like to ask us a Patreon question, like Jackie did, and we've had a few more in now because like we're finally at that point now where we've caught up to what's the first episodes of this are going out while we're recording this, and now people are more aware that we're doing it. So we're starting to get some questions in. So I've got a couple in the back burner now, so we're actually going to be okay, I think. We're not. The last couple episodes were a bit of a struggle for questions, but we've got a few now. If you want to ask us a question, the next questions asked, obviously, will from our perspective now, will be for the Analyzing Avatar podcast, which is what we're doing next. Very exciting. Very, very exciting. It's frustrating, actually, as well, because we weren't able to promote, because we did these in advance, the fact that, midway through this season of Rewind Reviews, we snuck another little movie review out there as a little surprise. We've not recorded it yet from the point of recording this, but by the time you're listening to this, we will have, and it'll have been out. So it's very confusing, this whole recording in advance thing. It breaks my brain. But if you want to check it out, we have... and I fear that we're about to have to do this, but yeah, we will have released, and you can already go check out us reviewing the Avatar movie. Shudder.
It's very exciting.
Shudder.
I'm
I haven't
very
seen it
excited
since I saw it in a theatre, and I'm very, very scared.
From our point of view, we haven't actually watched it yet. It's the next thing we record, and I'm pumped. I'm very excited to watch it.
Yeah, but for listeners to this, it's already out. We probably released it 4 or 5 weeks ago, so you can head back and watch that now. Or if you want, you can join our Patreon, where you can either ask us a question, like Jackie did, about whether we prefer Keenan and Kel to Sabrina, or an equally innocuous question. And you can do that through the Patreon for as little as $1 a month, but it also gives you access to the next podcast we release a week early. So right now, if you head over to the Patreon and sign up, you'll be able to hear the first episode of the second series of Analyzing Avatar. We're tackling season 2. Very excited. How you feel? You pumped for Avatar goodness?
Yeah, I might try and find a recap video for series 1. But I'm pumped.
Dear Lord. That's worrying, because it was only, 9 weeks ago, 10 weeks ago, we stopped recording those?
Lots happened since then, Dan. We've had Christmas since then.
Yeah, fair enough. So, thanks everyone for listening. It's been... we got one last thing to do, actually. It's been a blast doing this series, but we've got one last little thing to tackle, Chris, to tick off the list, which is that you get to pick the first film of the next series of Rewind Reviews, which won't be for a little while for listeners, but I'm very curious as to what you're going to... Because the tradition has now sort of accidentally become bad movie, because...
A bad movie,
because you gave us the joy that was The Girl Next Door, and I responded with the nuclear option and went with Joe's Apartment, which I feel very bad about even now. Still not over the pain of my decision there. What a terrible choice. But what are you thinking? What are we watching when we come back?
I'm weighing it up because there's two choices. One is a bad movie that I watched and just was so bored and so annoyed with, but I can't really remember it, and circumstances might have made it feel worse.
Right.
So there's that. The other is definitely one of the worst movies of all time, but does have a fascinating, that sort of hate watch, bizarre, and like all the stuff around it getting made, etc. But I feel like the more honest choice, a film that I did watch and was just painful, and a film that I doubt you've seen, whereas you might have seen the other choice.
Interesting.
So I'm gonna go for, but on the other hand, it's a slight risk in terms of the game of top trumping bad movies. It might not be as bad as I remember, but I'm fairly sure it is. So I'm gonna go with the Sandra Bullock Razzie nominated All About Steve.
Dear. Okay, All About Steve. I don't know anything about this movie. I know zero. I didn't even know that movie existed, I don't think.
It's bad. I watched it and I didn't do what I was gonna do, which I will do at some point. On an awkward blind Valentine's Day date,
Dear.
we watched this film instead of watching another film which I'd brought along because the DVD wouldn't play. And the other film is brilliant, and I don't know if you've seen that either. And part of me wanted to pick the other film first to make this even more painful. But yeah, maybe.
Well, this is quite a recent film. Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 2009.
This is
Careful.
That's by
You
far
wanna avoid
the
spoilers.
most recent film we've ever done. Then.
Is it?
Yeah, by far.
Yeah, I suppose it is.
Yeah, interesting. Because we, generally speaking, have been doing sort of early 2000s has been our sort of latest, I think, that we've covered thus far. Anything later than mid sort of thousands, we've not really done. So that is an interesting step.
Well, I've got nostalgic for it. I mean, I could pick something else if you want something older.
No.
but I don't think we should tie
No, we
ourselves
never had
to-
any hard or fast rules about how we interpret nostalgic, and we've never had a hard and fast rule on a cut-off point for the date or anything. It's just because I was just like, I don't remember this movie existing. Like, and now I kind of know why it kind of came out like more recently, and I definitely wouldn't have paid any attention to a Sandra Bullock movie from 2009. I think Sandra Bullock was well off my radar by that point. But I've just looked at and I can see the poster, and it's from the producers of Miss Congeniality, which might be the other movie you're referring to. Sandra Bullock, Thomas Hayden Church, and Bradley Cooper.
Yep.
I like
Good.
Thomas Hayden Church.
You might, like I say, maybe there's a slim chance I'm wrong, but I really don't think
on
I
Rotten
am.
Tomatoes, and it won 2 Golden Raspberry Awards. I suspect you're probably quite right, Chris.
Yeah.
This looks
It's not
dreadful.
good. I'm just trying to think. I think you might be right. It might be. Yeah, I think you are definitely right. I think it is the latest film. Like,
Oh yeah,
Final
no,
Destination
we're not
was-
even. I don't even think that's in question. I think it's I just can't imagine. I can't think of any other film we would have even considered for this that was this recent until now. But yeah, no, I'm happy for it to be opened up because that opens up a few possibilities as well down the line for us to like have movies that are more recent on this podcast anyway. So yeah,
Say that again. Sorry. Say that last bit again.
It just opens up the possibilities for us to do more recent movies going forward anyway. So that's fine.
Well, like you say though, I think that possibility was always there because there's no no rules.
No, there wasn't. But I think there was an implication that we were sort of looking at movies from our sort of like youth, our childhood, things that we had some sort of level of nostalgia or memory of. Like, but at a certain point, we were going to run out of that kind of movie. And I'm also happy that we sort of by choosing this now, we're sort of early-ish on setting up that we can dip into more recent stuff if we want, if we feel like it.
Yeah, for me, it was: is there a memory? Is there a story? Is there a connection? And because of the circumstances in which I watched this, there very much is. Although I never thought I would give myself a reason to sit through it again. I think I even vowed at the time, like, nah, I'm never watching this again. But if the game is pick a bad movie, and like I say, so I'll tell you now, the other choice was also a later movie. The other choice was Movie 43. But I think the problem with Movie 43 is the sheer craziness of the story behind the film,
Right.
and the fact that it even exists means that's an interesting discussion. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I don't know if you've seen it.
No, I haven't. I know about it, but it's a movie that lives
Yeah.
on through reputation, doesn't it? It's got it has a very
exactly.
it has a very particular reputation, and it's
Yeah, exactly.
It
So
lives
yeah,
on through that.
when we
So
come
yeah,
back,
so
all
when we-
about Steve.
I've just pulled up the date so people can, if people don't listen to our Avatar podcast, they'll know. We'll be back in October, which does feel like a million miles away. But I guess from when people listen to this in July, I think June, July, I think this episode's going out. Short Circuit 2. It won't feel as far away. But yeah, we'll be back on, I believe, the 26th of October to cover All About Steve.
Boom.
Yeah.
Get excited.
And I will say, as a little tease for that series of Rewind reviews, assuming the date doesn't change, there's a chance we may cover another big trilogy from our teen years than our childhood years that Chris and I both have a lot of opinions on. That has a sequel coming out around the time that series is airing. And if that assuming that release date for the sequel doesn't change, I reckon that'll be the trilogy we cover. It may still end up being the trilogy we cover, even if it doesn't, even if the release date moves. But yeah, so I'm quite excited for that as well. People could probably work it out from there. I won't say it directly just to tease it a bit more, but it wouldn't take a genius to work out if we're doing a series that sort of runs from October through December 2021. Then you can probably guess what trilogy we're talking about.
Yeah. Cool. There we go, people.
So yeah, if you're into our Avatar podcast, analyzing Avatar, in a week's time we'll be back to talk about the Avatar State, the first episode of season 2. If you've never checked it out, of course, it's a podcast where we talk about the TV show Avatar episode by episode. You can go back and listen to the entire first series now, or you can get the first episode of the second series right now if you head over to our Patreon, which now has an RSS feed, which will allow you to have them sort of sent to the podcast app of your choice when we early release content, which has made it way more accessible for everyone involved, and I'm very happy about that. So yeah, I think that's everything. I've been really enjoyed this series. It's worth noting, and I'll add this now very quickly. I'm not 100% today, so if I've seemed a little off, I apologize. I've not been well. Potentially, and Chris will probably read more into this than I was hoping, but potentially a bout of food poisoning that I'm fighting through at the moment. And I had to, before we started, I said to Nadia, I need to drink a couple of cups of tea and get my energy and caffeine levels up to push through the podcast. I literally sat in the living room and started doing chugga arm motions to try and get my energy levels up. Like a train.
Is the theory it's from your dinner last night then?
Potentially, Chris.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Which sounds weird. I don't always know what Dan had for dinner, but I happen to know what he ate last night.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think you've been fine. I don't think that's been noticeable.
Yeah, I didn't want to come straight in with like a guys, I'm sorry if I'm off my game today, but I did feel like at the end, once I got through it, if anyone's wondering if I did seem a little bit off, that will be why. I'm sorry. It's a shame because I was so excited to do Short Circuit 2 for a long time. I guess we're opening up now the world to sequels as well. So there are other movies we've covered that have sequels that we haven't tackled yet. I wonder, now we've done Short Circuit 2, that opens us up for like Gremlins 2. What other ones have we left open?
Toy Story 2.
Oh yeah, Toy Story 2.
I mean, we have technically done 4 sequels, but
yeah, because I guess when
right.
we've done the trilogies, we've done the sequels. Yeah, I know there's a Goofy movie too, which I'm not particularly fond of. That could be a fun one to do to upset me. Yeah.
I like the idea of gradually doing the Toy Stories.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah. Maybe we'll sprinkle the next Toy Story in next series. Who knows? We've still got to do the Bill and Ted sequel too.
Yes, yeah, and then obviously it'd be nice to do the third at some point.
Yes, yeah. So there you go.
Cool.
But yeah, thanks everyone for listening. It's been a great series. I'm very, very pleased how it's turned out. We're going to keep doing this, even if you're seeing small numbers on the YouTube videos. I promise we'll keep doing this because it is probably the most fun thing we do, I think.
Yeah, it's a shame to think it's a while before we watch All About Steve, but there we go.
Yeah, and also I will say as well, like even though it doesn't do particularly well on YouTube, it's starting to pick up a lot more through like Spotify and stuff on the audio side. So I'm quite relieved that we're starting to get people stumbling across us through those audio platforms. So that's good. So yeah, thanks everyone for listening. If you want to get us in other places, the Patreon is patreon.com/nothingbutstatic. YouTube is youtube.com/nothingbutstatic UK. I'm on Twitter @Dan Doolan. Chris is on Twitter @CBillingham. And yeah, we'll see you on the next series, or we'll see you next week for analysing Avatar. But in the meantime, Chris, take us home.
I've been Chris Billingham.
I've been Dan Doolan.
And this review has been Rewound.
I think maybe what happened at the end there, Chris, is finally all the cheating I did to give myself the energy to start this review, drinking a lot of like sugary caffeine-y tea, pumping myself up. I think that gradually brought me back to where I was when we started.